Central Africa to Angola, which is on the west coast, and then they hover above Liberia, which is very, very West Africa, and then they do a really quick journey up back up to Scotland, and that can just take a few days, which is pretty impressive. So that's where our Swifts are at, where our wonderful Swift group are at. So the casework team have been plodding along and doing the difficult work of responding to development plans. And we had a great meeting 2 weeks ago with more detailed training about how to do that. There were some great developments on that. And we've got another meeting in 2 weeks. The creative group have been super active as well. We are launching a creative campaign on the 2nd of May, so that's next weekend, and that's also Dawn Chorus Day. It's going to be called Swift Call, which was named by Leslie, and another member of the group, John, is going to do a live Dawn Chorus recording on social media. So he's going to be up at like 4 or 5 in the morning doing a live Dawn call and sharing it online, and it's going to hopefully launch this creative campaign plan, where we're going to basically invite members of the public to send in Swift art, so Swift inspired art, and we are going to show it on the cycle path that's going to happen during Swift Awareness Week in July. I'll say a wee bit more about in a minute. They're also working on an intergenerational video. So it's basically interviewing people who are 55 years and older about Swifts and about their experience as Swifts, particularly as when they were younger, and if they've got memories of lots of Swifts being around, lots of wildflowers being around, that kind of thing. So that's currently happening, and that's going to be released during Swift Awareness Week in July. We have an upcoming workshop which I've not told the 2 people that planned the workshop about, so that was Sarah and Michael, was it? I think. And that is, so we're going to be on Zoomland making Swift masks, and maybe we can meet other groups as well, so maybe your group as well might be up for a Swift mask making workshop. In terms of social media, they've been doing a really great job as well. And they made a wee document to try and collaborate everyone's vision of the Swift local group and to share it appropriately on social media. So if you have a wee moment just to fill in that questionnaire, I've sent it in an email. And we had our first volunteer profiles shared on social media, which was Leslie. Thank you very much for sending that in. And if any more of you would like to send a picture of yourself in nature, or even just like a picture of nature if you don't want to be in the picture, and then just a description of you and why you joined the group and that kind of thing, and we can celebrate you on social media. The final team was the tree team. Obviously we encountered a lot of difficulties with this because of COVID, but we've got a great plan to enact hopefully in the next tree season, which is next winter. I did share a 3 Hairs event with that, and I'm not sure if anybody managed to go, but that was a externally organised, was an RSPB tree planting event that happened just at the weekend. But I'm hoping the tree team of enthusiastic planting people will enjoy this session and can use some of the skills we learned about in organising tree workshops to instead plant wildflowers. So that's some updates. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to what I've said, anybody from any of the groups, if I've missed anything they want to share.
I just popped it in the chat, Katie, but we've had about half a dozen responses to the volunteer profiles, which is amazing. So thank you so much to everyone who's done that so far. We will take as many as we're given. So yeah, keep them coming in if you'd like to share what you're doing and why you think the project's important, etc. So we'll be showcasing you all online soon.
Cool, thanks Kate. Anybody else? Okay. So more updates about the wider project. These are a whole bunch of nest boxes that were made by a local woodworking group called The Forge. And they are now ready to go up. So that's what I've been doing, basically. And here's two of the sites. So two churches are involved in the project that are in Edinburgh. You might recognise St Mary's here on the right-hand side. And they've actually created their own very specialised nest boxes, which is what's in the picture on the left here. And they fit in the louvres of the towers. So you see where there's wee windows and they've got lots of lines. Those are the louvres, and those are specially adapted Swift nest boxes for those to go into the steeples of the church. And it's really exciting because St Mary's, if you don't know it, really stands out from the skyline of Edinburgh. So it'll be so nice to imagine the Swifts coming in and out of that. There's another church, St Ninian's, and they've already put up some nest boxes on their church as well, which is super exciting. And these are some of the locations where there's going to be more Swift hubs, so just more Swift nest boxes put on buildings. So we've got places in Muirhouse and Leith and the Meadows, out in Ratho, out in Collington. Leslie's got a lot of Swift nest boxes for her school, which is very exciting. And these will basically be the points of the self-led cycle path that's going to happen in July, where people can just follow pre-existing cycle routes to go to places where there's Swift hubs. And there will also be points along the way where it's good to do a survey, and so they can stop at different points and do a survey. And so hopefully some of you will want to come to that. There'll also be points along that where the artwork from the creative campaign will be displayed outdoors just during Swift Awareness Week. Yeah. Yeah, I forgot to say about that, Leslie. I'll mention it at the end. B, do you have a point?
Just, do you have a date in July for that?
It's the 2nd to the 11th of July is Swift Awareness Week. That's like an international thing. It's not just...
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Alright. So along the self-led cycle path as well, and in the points of the Swift hubs, there will be Swift streets. So that's some really good news I just got from Kate there just at the start of the meeting. But they're basically going to be streets where there'll be wildflowers and Swift nest boxes put up. So there'll be really Swift friendly streets basically, and hopefully really good examples that other places can use as well. So the two identified points for that is one is Ratho, and that was a suggestion from B, so thank you for that.
He was thrilled.
Yeah. And the other one is Meadowbank. And why they're so exciting is because if you can see in Swift Mapper here in the bottom right, the wee yellow symbol shows that there's a Swift nest there, and it has information on it as well if you click on it. So this example is that there were Swifts nesting just last year. So if we put nest boxes there, that really increases the likelihood of Swifts nesting. And the same for Meadowbank, so that's where Kate Street is. And Kate, do you want to share what you found out? Just if you're...
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm switching cameras and things on.
That's okay.
So some of you who are on the beginning of the call, you'll have heard this already. My neighbours around Willowbrae, we've got a Facebook group. It's kind of just sort of local people sharing information and sharing tools and like passing on secondhand items and stuff. So it's a really lovely community group. And I reached out to ask if I could scrounge a power drill off someone so I could do something in the garden. And one of the neighbours came back and said, yep, pop round. And Katie and I had been on a walk the day before looking for Swift sites and kind of identifying where there might be possible places to put up some nest boxes. And actually it turned out that the chap that I was borrowing the power drill from is one of the houses where I know that there are swift nests. And so in kind of our conversation about kind of local wildlife and various things, I managed to kind of turn it around to, I see you've got swift nests. And he was telling me that he and his neighbour both have swift nests under the eaves of their houses, and that actually they'd already bought the board for kind of making swift nest boxes. They'd been talking about it last lockdown and it's never gotten around to it. And so he said that was a kind of nice impetus for him and his neighbour to get the boxes made and put up. And they're already RSPB members, keen birders themselves. I think his wife is a keen birder, so he trudges out with the scope on his shoulder for her. But yeah, they're really keen to get involved, and it's a lovely, beautiful street that they've all got really nice kind of wild, abundant gardens. So super excited about that. And yeah, hopefully it'll be a good example of some good practice going on.
Thank you,
so
Kate.
Yeah, that was a good use of Facebook and me scrounging power tools.
Good work. Yeah, and also on that street, so relevant to Emma being here as well, is that as we were walking, there's lots of weeds popping up from the edges of the street, and I think that's what you're trying to do, or your area's doing, Kate, isn't it? Leaving the weeds and being pesticide free and just removing them manually and stuff. Is that?
Yeah, they have done. Last summer they organised a kind of gutter and side pavement clearing to try and avoid being sprayed. I don't know if we did get sprayed in the end, but it doesn't look like we've been sprayed. And the neighbours did a really good job of clearing last summer.
Brilliant. Yeah, so we'll hear more about that from Emma. Okay, and the final update is just to say about the murals. We've got a location and it's on Leaf Links, and we've got the permission and that kind of thing. So we'll be looking for an artist soon. And that's really exciting. Hopefully it's going to look like the Swifts migration route, so have a kind of reflection of different areas in Africa's culture on one side, and then the Swifts flying up to Scotland on the other side, kind of thing. So super excited about that. And yeah, we'll also hopefully have another mural spot in Muir House as well, in the gardens, which you need to go look at. Okay, so I think that's the end for me. And then just to say, Leslie's reminded me as well about one other thing. There's some people in the creative group that are compiling Swift poems, and then other people in the creative group, so Sonia and Sarah, are drawing some Swift artwork. So we'll hopefully have this wee tiny zine of Swift creativity, and that will act as a kind of inspiration for people to create artwork around the Swifts, so we can share that once it's ready. It will also be going out on Dawn Chorus Day on the 2nd of May. Thanks for reminding me, Leslie. Okay, so that's all the updates from the project and the Swifts. I wonder if I can pass on to Emma now, once I make you a host.
Hello.
There we go, you're the host now.
I'm now host. Very cool presentation, super cool to hear about the Swifts. I love the update of where they are, that's so exciting. I know in France, I'm from France, and my mom, they've set up loads of Swift boxes there, and yeah, it's really exciting. So I will attempt to share my screen to, where is it here? Let me start. Okay, and how do I make it so it's full screen? Oh God. I haven't had a presentation in a while. I'm much more organized for you guys. Little help? How do I make it
sorry,
full screen again?
Just at the bottom, like where
here?
left of the zoom, like where you zoom in and out. Yeah, that button. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Sorry, that's so sad.
I was muted.
So I'm Emma. I lead on the Pesticide Free Towns campaign. So a little bit of context, just to give you guys an idea. So the Pesticide Free Towns campaign is part of PAN UK, so that's Pesticide Action Network UK. So our charity works on all pesticides and reducing pesticides across the UK and actually internationally as well. There's lots of different PANs in the world. But yeah, PAN UK also works on agriculture, works on lobbying government, to end pesticide use. But our campaign, well, this campaign that I lead on is specifically for urban pesticides. And the goal is to phase out all urban pesticides. So where with agriculture, it's much more complex, with urban pesticides, it's a really easy target where you can just say, we need to phase out pesticides completely. It's completely achievable. So the campaign's been going on since 2015, so it's quite a while now, and we have a lot of achievements, but I'll show them as I go. Well, mainly a lot of campaigners that have done amazing work. We just support them, really. So here we go. So yeah, urban pesticides, to give you a bit of an idea. So there's 38 different toxic pesticides that are used. Most often it's glyphosate that you'll hear about. So we often say that if a council has banned glyphosate, that kind of counts, because yeah, most of the time that'll work. But yeah, it's better if a council says they banned all urban pesticides than just glyphosate. So yeah, to give you an idea of where they're sprayed, though it sounds like some of you might already know, it'll be so on your roads, in tree pits, on pavements and gutters, on the walls, unfortunately in your parks, in like depending on what your council manages, basically it'll be there. So school grounds, often playgrounds, it's such a dire list, hospitals. So yeah, shopping centers, all these places will most likely be sprayed. If you don't see weeds there at a time, or plants at a time where there usually would be, then it means it's been sprayed. And then another quite good indicator you can see on the picture on the right is that yellowing grass or yellowing plants systematically. That's pretty much, it's been sprayed with glyphosate. So you can see tree pits. And then, yeah, there's sometimes marks on the trees as well. So that's like burns. So yeah, and so these are workers that are spraying. We don't feature their face, obviously not their fault personally, but yeah, that'll be them with a backpack, hopefully with a mask on and with gloves on, but honestly, very often without any protection, which is quite scary for their own health. But yeah, so that's sort of what we're working against, is that idea of keeping these spaces neat and tidy, so removing any sign of diversity from these spaces. Yeah, and that's something councils spend a lot of money and time on, keeping these spaces neat and tidy. So impacts on human health. I didn't put any pictures in this slide, just to avoid anything. But it's to be honest, it's a lot more complicated than just I've been poisoned by pesticides. This is what I felt. That does happen occasionally, and it's horrible. But most often, it's slow acting exposure, which is really hard to pinpoint and point towards. But there has been landmark cases in the US. Some of you have probably heard of it with it's a very hard disease to say, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Sorry, but yeah, so that's an awful cancer that has now been really clearly pointed towards urban pesticides as well, which is quite interesting. It's not the typical agricultural worker. It was a man working spraying pesticides in gardens. So it is very much that slow exposure that can lead to effects. And children are much more vulnerable. They're smaller. They can intake more. They're more on the ground. They'll be playing in the grass. So it is worrying. And again, because it's not our usual route now, but because there are with councils to talk about it, because it's so difficult to point towards, because it's slow exposure. But now that there's some landmark cases in the US, it's been quite easier to point towards. Anyway, it's a side note in a way for Swifts, but a good one for convincing councils. So impact on biodiversity is more noticeable, let's say. So wildlife, as we all know, is increasingly decreasing, odd way of saying that. And also relying on cities more and more with just depleted habitat around the UK. So a few terrible stats. I mean, I feel like we all know them, of just terrible decline of birds and of insects and hedgehogs. So yeah, cities really are becoming crucial spaces and opportunities, I think. So yeah, and there was an article literally that came out last week in The Guardian that finally really pointed to the effect of herbicides on bees. Until now, the effect has been contested, let's say, and it's been more about the loss of resources that insects have. But now it's directly being said that they're also being killed by it. And I mean, from experience, campaigners have sent me systematically pictures of a space that's been clearly sprayed with glyphosate, and then rows of dead bees or other pollinators along those spaces that have been sprayed. So in experience, we've known that that's been true, but now we can finally point to it and say that it's happened. And then, so yeah, a lot of it is though about loss of resources. So birds obviously indirectly in loss of foods, but there are some cases of birds being poisoned directly. And interestingly, it's not just flowering plants. It's also in a lot of different plants, pavement plants, there'll be insects and larvae that live in the plant. So it's really important to not just have wildflowers, but also have all this diversity that we can find on our pavements. It's a lot more complex. So we're trying to really translate that idea of a holistic biodiversity that can be found in urban spaces. Yeah. So a little positive note after the impacts. I never know where to put the successes so far, but I thought that's a little bit of a heavy sort of the impacts. So successes have been plenty. So that's the map of active campaigns, so green is places that have gone pesticide free. There are more, but sometimes it chooses which color it wants to use. Orange is an active campaign, and pink has restrictions in place. And there'll be substantial restrictions. We don't just put them if council has said, we have, I don't know, like a little bit less glyphosate, like it will be something substantial. And in Edinburgh in particular, I thought I'd update you that there's a 50% glyphosate reduction that the council has committed to. And there is a no spray zone. I'm not entirely sure where it is, unfortunately. I can look into that for you. And then pesticide-free Balerno, which obviously is nearby, have been campaigning amazingly and have been doing incredible work. So they're also pesticide-free. But yeah, there's a lot going on in Edinburgh and in Scotland in general. So there's a lot to build on and to be excited about, to be honest. There are always some going back. Midlothian sort of are stepping back on their commitment. They had passed a full ban and just recently decided to allow glyphosate again in some spaces. I mean, on the upside, it's been met with loads of articles saying that it's terrible and it's really not being met well, which I think is positive, but unfortunately it's still not a positive thing in itself. But yeah, all this to say, this is very much achievable to go pesticide free. Loads of places have done it. And yeah, a lot of places are safeguarding nature. And so how do we do that? So the answer is there is no simple answer. There's a lot of different solutions to go pesticide free. I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna go into huge depth for you guys because I don't think that's the whole point of today. But yeah, I like to say that it's more of a patchwork or a puzzle. Basically, the council needs to see where they're using pesticides so far and what their specific needs are. Different cities will have different needs. So in Edinburgh, certain areas will be, like around train stations, really busy, footfall. You won't necessarily need to have lots of spraying there, even though you think, oh, this is a place that really needs to be sprayed. Actually, because so many people are walking there, it's not necessarily important to spray there as much. But yeah, so and then maybe in your parks, you'll want to have a little bit more. So you can turn to mechanical weeding there, to hand weeding. And then on the streets, I actually used to live in Edinburgh, so it's nice to picture it in my mind. But yeah, in the streets, you can use lots of different technologies. So there's a picture of foam stream. That's the one in the bottom middle. That's like basically hot foam, which is completely non-chemical, but it just keeps the heat. Whereas hot water, they found the heat would leave too quickly. So this is all quite technical, but yeah, it works quite well. It's been one of the most successful ones. And actually now foam stream is available in Scotland. Balerno has just started using it. And yeah, and then there's the classic mechanical weeding. So there's the hardcore mechanical weeders that you can see on the bottom left. I mean, yeah. So all these solutions are, if you need to weed, there are solutions. You don't have to be sort of subjected to the people that are going to say, well, it doesn't look tidy if you leave the weeds. But yeah, it's an option to have weed management plans. And yeah, depending on where you are, you can leave some areas to have nothing. You can have some areas where you mechanical weed, etc. But yeah, something important to consider is that your council needs to be behind this. It's great to have volunteer things, but you need to be able to then say for sure they're not going to spray in this area for your own safety, but then also for longevity. So having a motion passed by the council is really what we advise, and for it not to just be reduction, but really for them to say we will phase out. So they can have a transition phase towards that. They can say we will phase out over 2 or 3 years, but very much we will phase out in the idea of completely stopping. And yeah, it takes time, and it's very important to communicate and to bring people in, the public into your decision. It's not just the council onto residents, because eventually residents will complain, and if they don't understand. So yeah, it's important to bring people in. So yeah, do nothing is the nicest one, and it's definitely the nicest one for swifts. It definitely means more habitat, and yeah, more resources for animals in your area, and just nicer as well. Like a huge component of this, which is harder to point towards, is just the feel good aspect. And I think during pandemic lockdowns, it was a very strange silver lining to be able to really highlight how important it was for urban spaces to be greener and wilder, not just greener in a manicured way, but wilder, that sense of curiosity and that sense of play that people could have from noticing different things. And yeah, and on a concrete level for your council, it is cheaper to do nothing. So it is cheaper to designate an area as pesticide free, and to say, I mean, this sign, pardon the weeds, I actually think celebrate it, say like, this is, you could say like, these are pavement plants, we love them. Like, so again, that's sort of in between, but whatever you want to call it, however you want to go by it, there's lots of ways of making it a positive thing. But the more you highlight it and the more you bring people in, the more the more you'll be met with positive responses and curiosity. I mean, it'll also mean that people who are in different organizations or different groups can then tap into it and join in. So yeah, it's some examples of urban areas that have been left to go pesticide free and left to flower. Some of them more manicured than others. I mean, you can literally just leave it. I think the bottom middle one is literally just left, but then other ones are a bit more consciously planted. It's totally up to you. I think both are important. Definitely leaving something to flower on its own is also important, just because of the diversity that you can't make up in a way. Oh, I have a slide missing. Okay, sorry, well, we're going backwards. But yeah, another cute way of educating the public. So this is Rebel Botanists. I think they're based in Plymouth. And I mean, it's quite a known thing now, but yeah, chalking on the ground and educating people. So it doesn't have to be the superficial signs everywhere. It can also just be chalk on the ground and telling people what sort of weeds there are or pavement plants. Yeah, and really bringing people in and playing that sort of, that playful aspect. Looking at my things, do I have anything else to say? Yeah, so just some numbers, because I didn't say them earlier. We do have over 70 councils that have gone pesticide free and over 80 active campaigns. I think 83 right now. So it is really achievable, and all these different places will have adopted their own tailored solutions, but all of them now really in mind of preserving biodiversity and really working towards having more pollinators. So it's an angle that really councils are responding to and are really favoring. So yeah, and then sort of a scary quote to leave you with. But yeah, it is ironic to think that I changed it because it said man and his, and I thought, you know, this is 2021, we can do better. So yeah, might determine their own future by something so seemingly trivial as the choice of an insect spray. Yeah, not so trivial. And yeah, it's just, sorry, I know it's time for me to stop. So yeah, we have lots of resources if you're interested in reading more about it. We actually also have a alternatives to herbicides guide now as well, which is literally lists of organizations and companies and case studies of different ways of weeding. But I think in this case, if it's more about not using pesticides at all, then yeah, there's lots of different resources for that too. Thank you. If there's any questions, this is the time.
Do you have any resources? I'm thinking again of my little community kids group. Do you have any kid-friendly stuff?
Yeah, we have actually a kids challenge where they can identify different plants and insects and things like that. Yeah, there's definitely children-oriented activities. And there's actually the Nature City Challenge that's coming up. And I think that's a really nice activity to do with children. You download an app, iNaturalist, and then you record all the different nature. Basically, it's quite a loose definition. And we're encouraging people to take part in that, and then tag us or tag whoever you want, just to really highlight to the councils the amount of diversity that's in the area and celebrate it really. Because we often hear from the people who don't want the diversity and who don't want plants, but we don't hear enough from the people who do. Yeah, I'll share those.
I was going to mention the City Nature Challenge as well. Where I am in Glasgow, we did City Nature Challenge with our local community, and following that, one of the challenges was to try and get as many pavement plants as we possibly could. So not spraying, not doing pesticides, and make sure that we had plenty of pavement weeds, and no one did any weeding for a couple of weeks in all the kind of green spaces and gardens. And since then, people have continued posting pictures of pavement weeds, new species that they've found on our Facebook group, which has been a really positive biodiversity engagement.
That's incredible. Yeah, and the more we've done it, the more we realize how many quite rare species you can find, and it's really incredible. And yeah, someone we work with did a survey in Hackney, where I am now, and they found over 40 different species just in one bit of the road. It was incredible. So yeah, it's excited.
With the City Nature Challenge as well, just for everyone else, in my day job, I'm volunteering just now, but in my day job with the Giving Nature Home team, it's Glasgow and Edinburgh based. We've got a little bit of friendly rivalry going on between the Glasgow and the Edinburgh side of things. So obviously I'm based in Edinburgh and the rest of the team are based in Glasgow. Yeah, if you are interested in getting out and recording, it's really straightforward. As was said earlier, you just download the iNaturalist app, and it kind of collects all the data from the 30th of April into the 3rd of May, and it kind of puts it into one central UK pot, but also into the Glasgow and the Edinburgh kind of project area teams as well. So we've got the central belt pretty much covered. Yeah, if we can get loads of Edinburgh recorders up and running, that would be amazing. It's really intuitive, and the app helps you identify everything as well. So the more we put into it, the computer algorithms learn better, and we get much better idea of what's there. So that's my plug for Edinburgh. We want to put the Ouija's to shame, please.
And I would say, yeah, if you could, if you do want to share on your social media as well, and then tag maybe pesticide free towns as a hashtag. Basically, the way we see it is going pesticide free is sort of the first step to then being able to have all these things possible. So yeah, but yeah, feel free to tag everyone else alongside. It's absolutely not about competition in terms of pesticide free towns. We're very collaborative. And
we are too. We're just being slightly facetious and getting a bit of friendly rivalry.
Oh, well, for sure for the challenge. Yeah, definitely when you're actually inputting it, like win. But in terms of tagging and yeah, we don't care if you tag pesticide free towns and whoever else that you're involved with or things like that. But yeah, it would just be really helpful to then show to councils, look how much diversity there is in this area, yeah, there's so much more reason to not spray it, and look how involved your residents are in caring for it. So yeah, that's my my call.
Anybody else has any questions? Oh, so we got one question of, could you post a link to the City of Nature Challenge campaign? And I can certainly send that. Oh, Kate's got it. Thanks, Kate.
I'll share links to things afterwards. I'll give them to Katie, and then you can share them around for Pesticide Free Towns. But yeah, in terms of Pesticide Free Towns, we have a newsletter that you can join and just sort of keep up to date. It's only every 2 months, so it's not a lot in your inbox. But yeah, maybe if you want to just keep up to date with what's going on, or if you want to link it in, yeah, we're very happy to speak, as I am now, at other people's events or whatnot. Yeah, you keep in touch.
Brilliant. And thank you so much, Emma. That was so wonderful. Yeah, actually, if you could make me a host again. So that...
Oh yeah, that would be good.
But yeah, that was a really wonderful presentation. Thanks for summarizing the project, and yeah, all the different ways that we can weed without using actual pesticides is really useful. Well, there's something I really liked, but I can't remember what it was now. Yeah, anyway, it's good as well to know about the Blernos is so close by and really inspirational then that people, because we've got people from all over Edinburgh, maybe that model can be replicated in different parts of the project as well.
Absolutely.
Sorry, different parts of the city.
They're super forthcoming as well. They're really, really keen to speak to other campaigners. So if anyone's interested, they would love for you to be in touch. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And the resources look really wonderful on the website as well. Yeah. Yeah, these sound very, very encouraging. Yes, it was very encouraging to know that, yeah, people can kind of take action at a grassroots level. And
yeah,
I'll get chatting to the council. But we can get chatting to the council.
Yeah.
There is something in Edinburgh where on the meadows they've left like an area wild, and at the start, because I had a friend working in, and at the start they got a lot of phone calls from members of the public saying, oh, you've forgotten to cut the grass here, kind of thing, even though it was like wildflowers growing. And then the council like invested time and energy into like training staff to like appreciate why they were doing it, so that they could have very positive conversations with people that were phoning in to say like why they were doing it and why it was great for wider biodiversity. Oh, that's what I liked you saying was the like holistic aspect of, because yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Bee's got her hand up.
You just said, Emma, that the Blerno people were really keen. Is there a specific contact person?
Yeah, I can. I'm not good at multitasking, and it would require me going into my emails.
Sure.
But yeah, absolutely, I can share that. And yeah,
thank you.
That's great. Yeah.
I'll write it down to send on to Bee.
Thanks. Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah. So massive thank you, Emma. So now introducing Scott, who's got a million words of wisdom about wildlife gardening. And I need to make you the host now, Scott.
Okie doke. You know, it's been such a long time since I've done Zoom call. I'm probably going to mess this up now, but yeah, okay. At least like I'm the host. Let me start up my thing. In fact, let me share my screen. That'll be the first thing to do. There we go. And let's make it big. Didn't work. Come on. There we go. Super. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this is an old talk that I've given for years and years and years, from my days when I used to be in bug life, and it's mainly, I hands up say it's all about bugs and little beasties, but I have tried to squeeze in some swiftiness, and obviously because the swifts are feeding on bugs and beasties, it's all going to be kind of sort of hopefully quite relevant. The first sort of top 10 tips are really kind of focused on gardens and allotments and kind of things you can do in your kind of sort of back garden. But I guess, I mean, if you're interested, what I could do is at the end speak about sort of wider kind of sort of projects for kind of like community groups, and maybe if you've got control of your local green space, about kind of projects for putting in wildflower meadows or pictorial meadows, or sort of bigger sort of projects. So I'll maybe save those until the end and jump to those, and I'll get started with my top 10 tips for biodiversity, i.e. making more bugs. Okay, so yeah, to follow on from Emma, definitely don't use pesticides, and that's really my top one as well. Obviously my background in bug life, it was all about saving the bees, and pesticides really are the major thing that you don't need to use in your garden. And not using pesticides, you get lovely bees, you get lovely butterflies coming in. And don't fall for the horrible campaign, a advertising where some of the weed killers that are being sold here actually come with free seeds. So this was, I think this was in B&Q a couple of years back, and they were selling a neonicotinoid, a weed spray, like sort of bug spray, with free seeds, and making it look as though it's good for biodiversity. So please don't fall for that. We'll speak about some of the other natural pest relief that you might can encourage into your garden in the form of ladybirds and lacewings and stuff just after this. So, I mean, one of the major things that I think is really important if you're trying to encourage kind of insects, and particularly, sort of pollinators, a lot of the swifts will be feeding on things like hoverflies, or a lot of other sort of species that are kind of, sort of flying up above the sort of ground and kind of parks and things. And so one of the key things that you can do in your garden is to focus on and be aware of what you're sort of planting and what's available throughout the year. So making sure that you've got things that are flowering from very early spring, so things like crocuses and snowdrops in the very kind of start of the year is really important, when those bumblebee queens and hoverflies that have overwintered are just kind of sort of coming out. But also at the very end of the year, like in the autumn, when lots of the wildflowers maybe out in the countryside are kind of, sort of coming to an end. If you've got things in your garden that will flower kind of at that point of the year, you can encourage a lot more bumblebees, butterflies, all sorts of amazing sort of species into your garden that will also benefit, sort of the other sort of wildlife as well. So I've got some plants that are a great for sort of pollinators, and I think one of the key things that you can do, and I think there's one thing that Emma kind of sort of mentioned as well, is that it's not all just about the nectar and the pollen and the kind of the actual flowers themselves, because there's so much more biodiversity associated with the kind of leaves of your dandelions and the stems of any thistles that are kind of out there. And by allowing those kind of native plants to just exist in your garden or on the paths in your streets, you can encourage a huge amount more sort of biodiversity than you would just have alone. There's a whole suite of what we call vegan hoverflies is the term for them. These Chilosian hoverflies, and their larvae, instead of like so a lot of hoverflies kind of feed on aphids and things, but Chilosians live inside thistles and dandelions stems, and kind of like almost kind of sort of mine the inside of those. So allowing all these kind of sort of weeds to come you can increase the number of pollinators that are going to be sort of in your garden as well. So I mean, I've done a quick sort of list of kind of native species that are really good for sort of pollinators in there. And I think in the next ones, I've kind of sort of broken it down into a few sort of spring species, so things like wildflowers that you could potentially have in the garden that are great in the spring, garden plants in there as well, and some shrubs, summer flowers, wild rock rose, cranesbills are just amazing. Scabieuses are fantastic, and obviously honeysuckle, fantastic for moths and night flying insects. And having all those kind of species coming out just in the evening when swifts are, you know, sort of getting that last feed for the brood, sort of in, is hugely important. And so having these kind of sort of a diversity of plants flowering throughout the year and in different locations in your garden can be really, really important. And late summer. So I think, as Katie said, this is going to be recorded. So, and if anyone wanted to, I can easily send you this a presentation as a kind of PDF or something kind of afterwards. So you've got a list of all the species, and I don't have to go through them in a kind of species by species wrote. I haven't enough coffee. I'm forgetting words. Okay, on to the next bit. Yeah, so once you've got your plants so in there, so planting for pollinators is the early and late spring. Use as much native species as you possibly can. Think about your herbaceous perennials, your crocuses, your kind of spring bulbs, but also think about your hedging. So if you've got hedging, things like flowering hedging, like hawthorn and blackthorn, those linear kind of sort of structures are super important for lots and lots of kind of flies and small insects, pollinating insects, and of course swifts going along sort of linear hedgerows. That's a really important thing. So putting in hedgerows is a really important sort of feature. Flowering trees. Some trees that flower at different times can be an enormously important sort of pollen source and nectar source for lots of insects, and so you will have enormous clouds of insects over sort of trees as well. So trying to get as many native trees, shrubs, herbs, and sort of bulbs into your garden, and you're bound to have like a whirlwind of swifts flying above. Moving on to the next bit. Okay, so don't use peat. For 4 or 5 years, I worked on a peat bog, restoring peat bogs, and I have seen firsthand the devastation caused by trying to put back together a destroyed peat bog, over a 9,000-year-old sort of peat bog that was completely devastated by stripping it for agricultural, for horticultural sort of peat. And there's loads of amazing species that live on peat bogs, and amazing unique things that are becoming extinct and rare all across Europe because of the use of peat for gardening. So please don't do it. There are lots and lots of peat-free alternatives these days, so don't use it. And including things like wool compost and bracken compost, which is amazing stuff. Kind of interesting smelling, a slightly funky sort of smelling, particularly when I had like about 7 bags of it in my bath, because I didn't have anywhere else to put it. So it was like in my bathroom for a few days. Never mind. Lots and lots of different varieties. And instead of actually having a sort of peat, what you could do is get in a compost heap or a wormery. And this is amazing. Make your own. So instead of buying compost, make your own, have a little compost heap, a wormery, and the actual benefits of the species that you attract into the garden to live in the your compost heap is enormous as well. So you get things like millipedes, but you get cool things like, pseudoscorpions that might come in, feeding upon your springtails, little harvestmen, frogs, toads, maybe even slowworms sort of coming in to sort of breed in your compost heap. So compost heaps are fantastic and really, really sort of great for biodiversity, and you don't have to use peat. One of the things that I love to say is go a bit wild. So this is about just not cutting the grass. So if you've got a lawn, what about changing at least part of it into a wildflower meadow and just not cutting it during the spring and summer. Leave it, see what's in there. It might be for the first year you just don't cut it. See the orchids, see the actual native plants that are in there that might actually come up, and you could be really surprised at what's actually lurking in the seed bank, that just when it's given a chance to flower will sort of come out. However, sowing a little wildflower meadow sort of patch is really, really great fun, and it's amazing how many species will actually sort of turn up in there. When I used to go into schools in Glasgow, and I'd kind of ask kids if they'd ever seen a grasshopper, and you'd think, oh yeah, like surely they have. No, the number of kids who've never seen a grasshopper, because the local parks were mown within an inch of their life. There was no long grass anywhere. And so I used to tell stories about, collecting grasshoppers with my friends as a kid, and seeing who could have a competition to see who could jump the furthest, the kind of, who had the prize grasshopper. It was great fun. And just missing out on that is terrible. So there's national campaigns, things like No Mow May, but I'd go as far as to say, don't mow at all during the spring and summer. Let everything grow, and see what will come up. I've included in here a bit about homes for wildlife, and obviously when we're speaking about that, we're really, oh, where's this? Oh, there it goes. I was going to say the only one that was missing was the swift nest. So putting up bird boxes, and particularly obviously swift nests. You guys are obviously will have heard much about that, but putting up a diversity of different nest boxes for a whole range of species can encourage other species in. So things like, if I go back to the front one, bat boxes, potentially hedgehog homes and bee hotels. One of these kind of little beehives at the frontier are in my local green space, and people putting those up in lovely sunny conditions are responsible for the red mason bee spreading from England all the way up pretty much to Inverness in the last kind of 6 or 7 years. And really that's been due to people actually putting these kind of bee hotels in their garden, and really encouraging this fantastic little pollinators to sort of spread across the country. So well done everyone who's got a bee hotel in their garden. Moving on, build a bug hotel. So a really, really simple bug hotel for overwintering bees and butterflies. It's just getting a mesh kind of sort of tube. Almost like one of your kind of old-fashioned kind of sort of bin, sort of a black bin kind of sort of holder. And the really important thing is to put sticks through the bottom of it. And then at the end of the year, when you've gathered all the leaves have fallen off your trees, you fill up this tube with all of those kind of sort of dried leaves. The branches at the bottom, keep them off the ground, and they, instead of rotting down and becoming compost, they form this lovely cozy a structure that is fantastic for things like ladybirds and all sorts of species to kind of sort of spend the winter in. Then when it comes to sort of the end of February, sort of March time, you can pop the whole lot into your compost sort of heap, allow it to break down and use it in the garden. But during that time, you've allowed lots and lots of kind of species to spend the winter. Things like your peacock butterfly here. Deadwood, massively important. So many species, and in fact, some of the rarest species in the UK are associated with kind of sort of deadwood sort of piles. So if you've got kind of sort of space to put some deadwood piles, log piles under your hedge or in kind of woodland, fantastic. And you'll encourage more species that potentially could feed sort of swifts as well. Things like this amazing thing, which is the snail hunting beetle. So this is a Cycrus caraboides, a funky little a ground beetle. I don't know if you can see that. It's got a really narrow kind of sort of long head, and normally when I'm giving this talk to gardeners, they're always saying, well, it's all right not using pesticide, but what about all the slugs and snails that are going to come in and eat all my hostas? And so these guys are the solution. They are the solution. They're absolutely awesome. You put a log pile in, in comes your little Cycrus caraboides, thinking, oh, this is a lovely little cozy place to live. These are specialist slug and snail munchers, and they will come out and each day stick their head into a snail shell and like pull the snail out, scoff them up. So if you've got lots of little, you know, habitat piles throughout your garden, you can get loads of kind of cool ground beetles, and you will not have an issue with slugs and snails, even though I really like slugs and snails, and they are fantastic biodiversity. Ponds. So I think water in any garden, so like, you know, even a bird bath, but if you can get a wildlife pond, it's such an important feature. The insects flying over a pond in the evening are, you know, you have a huge cloud of small kind of non-biting midges, dragonflies, all sorts of stuff. And having a kind of sort of naturalized kind of sort of pond is a really, really important thing for biodiversity. You get birds coming down to drink on it, bees will come down to drink in it, and you'll also get like lots of you know, sort of native species coming to live and breed in it, things like toads and sort of frogs. And it doesn't take much, like a tiny little container, like a washing up bowl is great. Sorry, Kate, are you waving to say that I've gone over?
No, Sarah, it needs to go. I was waving at Sarah.
Oh, sorry.
She's got to go to something else.
I haven't actually got any time to say how long I'm taking.
Yeah.
I'll try and swiftly go over.
Minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, yeah, so lots and lots of kind of lovely things you can get from ponds. And my last thing I was going to say is record. The 10th thing is record all the visitors that you come, so they come into your garden. So binoculars, you don't need very much. Pots, hand lenses, cameras. Great fun to have a look at the biodiversity that might come into your garden, the bee bugs and beasties, and also the plants as well, if you let the grass grow. And so many online apps available now on websites for sending in records. iRecord is fantastic. iNaturalist is a really, really good introduction, and really is a brilliant app for identifying sort of species. But of course, as soon as the Swifts arrive, yay, logging into Swift Mapper and recording all those kind of fantastic Swifts and their nests when they first get back in. I think just after this, I've got a little bit about if you're looking at kind of the wider kind of sort of landscapes rather than just kind of in your garden, what you could potentially do for pollinators and kind of insects in a kind of wider scale. So I think really one of the things that is really important is a habitat creation enhancement for pollinators, getting more flowers kind of sort of out there. And there are a variety of different things you can do. So some of the kind of popular things at the moment are things like pictorial meadows, which might not be native meadows, but will maybe have like a range of kind of exotic plants kind of in there, as well as kind of sort of native sort of plants. They can look fantastic. They can have a high impact and kind of instant effects. Some of them are, you know, sort of in all sorts of zany sort of colors. However, quite often they're not native. Because the way that they're kind of made, quite often they're kind of sown, then effectively the whole lot's destroyed and dug over the next year, and you have to sow it again. So the cost to the council or whoever's actually putting it in is actually quite expensive. And as Emma said earlier, you know, the non-flower part of biodiversity is really important. So the nesting habitat that's in there and the kind of other leaves and plants is really important. Wildflower grasslands and wildflower meadows, they are amazing, and so many more councils putting in wildflower meadows at the moment. Huge range of different kind of seed mixes that are now available of Scottish provenance and local provenances to use. So just you know, have a look at the soil type that's kind of there and decide which ones are going to be the best for use. And I think the great thing is about they're much more appropriate plant species for your kind of local area, much more perennial, so it's sustainable. And there's grasses that are foods for butterflies, and also there's lovely grasshoppers that I was looking for. And managing it like an old-fashioned meadow, where you allow it to grow throughout the year, cut at the end of the year, allow the seeds, you know, to sort of fall, and then you can carry it away. Leave the cuttings at one part of the site, maybe under a hedge, which gets into a fantastic, like, lovely nutrient enriched kind of sort of area where you get different species coming up, and also it works as a compost heap as well, which is great for all sorts of kind of cool beasties. Grassland enhancement kind of ideas, so putting in as simple as putting in a couple of bulbs into the grassland during the September, October time is a great thing to do. Look great, and then you can mow afterwards as well, which is always kind of sort of great. Flowering lawns, so Scotia Seeds do a fantastic flowering lawn mix. So if you're really like sort of need to cut your grass every, you know, sort of 5 weeks or whatever, they've got a fantastic mix which you can actually sow in that place, which grows fairly short little sort of plants that will produce an enormous amount of flowers, while, you know, sort of within grassland. So things like self-heal and a chamomile, sort of daisies, and bird's foot trefoil, really great in a flowering lawn. Lots of opportunities with grass, with a public green spaces. So contact your council, ask them about your community group getting ownership or taking management control of local green spaces that maybe they're managing, you know, just with kind of a 20 cuts per year. If you think you can do something slightly better and you've got like a group together, like I've done in my local kind of area, we've now got 3 major local parks that we're all managing, and it's great fun, really good fun. You learn a lot, everyone else learns a huge amount, the council's saving money, and the biodiversity is really benefiting, and it's great fun. Lots and lots of people in, you know, Edinburgh and Glasgow don't have gardens, or don't have window boxes, don't have a space for window box. Getting them out and getting involved in a community garden can be a really good fun and a great way of doing things as well. Also zooming through these, so we've kind of mentioned earlier the kind of plants that you might use. Road verges are another massive kind of sort of a habitat for pollinating insects and for insects in general. And actually sending an email to badger your local council and your local councillors about leaving the road verges or switching from you know, you're not asking for them to be turned into wildflower meadows necessarily, but just stop cutting them during like the flowering season. Allow all those beautiful flowers to come, and and then, you know, cut and collect at the end of the year. Huge impact for biodiversity, huge impact as a kind of green corridor for these, for, you know, species like stoats and voles moving through the city. Verges are enormously important. Brownfield sites, I'll kind of skip past those. The very last one was about green roofs. So opportunities to install green roofs. Edinburgh is so lucky in having actually some really nice green roofs scattered throughout the city, but you can always have more. And if looking out for opportunities where you might actually be able to put in some green roofs, this isn't your standard kind of green roof. This would be something like called a biodiversity or living green roof, which has got a lot more sort of native species, a lot more, you know, microhabitats kind of in there, dead wood. You can put all sorts of cool things up on a roof, and you don't need very much space to do it either. Things like a shed, or your local community centre might have like a flat roof. You can look at kind of converting those, and it's not a huge amount of money to do it, to get the infrastructure installed. Okay, I'm gonna stop there because I've rambled on for another 8 minutes longer than I was going to. Okay, thanks. And I'll stop sharing and give how do I give you back?
If you hover over the image of me, and then on the right hand side there's like 3 wee dots.
I see it. Make host.
And then I should say make a host.
Super.
Cool, grand. Thank you so much, Scott. Just first thing, if anybody has any questions.
I think so.
It tied in really nicely with talking about next steps, like seeing those examples of different ways, different places we could plant wildflowers, and your first-hand experience of contacting the council and getting an area that you could use and look after. I've been hearing so many stories from Scott every week, like, oh, I was doing this in the garden in the community space, because you don't have a garden in Glasgow, right?
No, I mean, I've got a little balcony which I kind of try and plant up with as many native shrubs and kind of plants as I possibly can, and do moth trapping to lure things in to see what I can record. So I've got it's amazing the species that will come even to quite a high balcony in a block of flats in the middle of Glasgow. But yeah, I think there's lots and lots of lessons to be learned from kind of working as kind of communities and networking with other kind of green space communities to share kind of our knowledge and top tips for getting the council to do what you want them to do, and to stop that kind of, you know, the pesticide spraying, and to do things a bit more, you know, biodiversity friendly, and councils these days are listening. It's, you know, the green agenda and the election this year is really nice to see. You know, I think every political party is mentioning green kind of sort of in there, and it's really nice that councils and politicians are now kind of listening, and biodiversity and climate is one of those kind of really sort of things that are going to win.
Lots of great ideas. Thanks, Scott. So it's like that that tower, the bug thing over the winter with the wire. That's great. I can see that we can do that in both of our gardens, and the Scotia seed short flowering things. That's a great idea as well. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh no, that's okay. I think the mesh we're holding here kind of sort of leaves. One of my kind of pet bugbears is seeing people burn all their leaves throughout the year, and in the autumn. So they're collecting all the leaves together and then they're burning them, and it might smell lovely. It might like seem like autumn, and it's like, oh, roast chestnuts and burning the leaves. And then people will say, you know what? I've never seen any ladybirds this year. Like when I used to go to Gardening Scotland, and you'd be running this, you know, the bug life stall, and then people would come up to you and say, oh, I haven't seen any ladybirds for about five years. And I'd say, oh, you know, like, so that's really strange. What do you do with all the kind of leaves that come off of the shrubs and the trees? Oh, I burn them. But burn them, and I spray all the insects and like the aphids. It's like, well, like most of those little ladybirds are actually hibernating in the leaf litter, so they'll be kind of tucked up in the leaf litter, and it, you know, offering suggestions for places where they might actually, you know, things like that tower of leaves, great for overwintering ladybirds, and they may actually see another ladybird the following year. Yeah, it's very sad, very sad.
Cool. I don't think anybody has any more questions. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Scott. There's a wealth of information, and yeah, the recording will be online if anybody wants to listen to it again, and I can put the presentation somewhere accessible as well for people to look at in their own time as well. And yeah, just for going forward, ideally we could all meet and plant wildflowers somewhere in Edinburgh, and that would be really lovely, but obviously we can't do that still. But yeah, I guess just like thinking back to the plan that the tree group made, really wonderful plan, which the kind of idea behind that was like looking at what's in your local area, looking at community spaces and like parks for places that we could plant trees, but we can also apply that to being pesticide free in those areas, or adding things like wildflowers or the different ways to encourage the insect population as well. Yeah, with that like really great example about yeah, it's cheaper for the council to hand over responsibility to local people. So if there was appetite, we could also make a wildflower group that might take that on and try and find a site within Edinburgh, because obviously the planning for that is sort of, we don't need to be in person for that, and the two times to plant wildflowers is now, and it's also in the autumn, so it might be quite a nice end of project event to find somewhere to plant wildflowers and to hopefully be able to meet by the autumn and plant some wildflowers somewhere in Edinburgh. Scott, I remember you talking about you could plant it in like a swift shape. It's such a great idea. It would be so nice. And we can put signs saying leave the weeds and all the pesticide free things around that as well, and hopefully inspire more people. Yeah, so if there was appetite for that sort of working group, just email me and we can try and link people up together and talk about what sort of steps we can take next, and maybe ask Scott for some of those resources about how to talk to the council, and also look at Emma's resources as well. Can make cute little signs for the wildflowers. Yeah. Yeah. I did that on the Three Hares Woodland, where I got some kids to make signs for the wildflowers, and they were so cute. They weren't that informative, but they were really lovely. There were some informative signs as well, so a bit of a mix. B?
Just what you were saying about planting wildflowers and taking over local spaces, just not wanting to reinvent the wheel or do what somebody's already doing. And my local park's in Leith Park, and there's a lot of scope there, I think, for less. They left a rather small, well, as a start, they left some bit not cut last year, but maybe that's what that's an area the tree group's thinking about, or somebody knows of another group that's already working